It's the Accountant Talent Podcast, going out to anybody in the world that has responsibility for bringing in new staff, new people, building out new teams in accounting practices all over the world. I'm here with Jeff Phillips, my co-host of Accounting Fly and Paget Business Services. Jeff, good to have you with us. We're talking about onboarding new hires in a remote world. We've just done a great episode on the different options for remote. Jeff, just sum up for us the argument for remote staff.
When you choose to not care where your next hire works, you can find the best player for the position domestically and globally. You can tap into freelance and project-based talent, which is such a great opportunity for accounting teams to hire. And you can tap into offshoring, which is finding a major economic advantage to hire people that probably are not available at a decent rate where you live. And so that, to me, that I call that the new talent stack, Rob. It's the new way to hire in accounting firms. It's proven. It's not that new. It's proven, but not everybody knows about it.
No, we know there are laggards in the accounting world, and progress is generally glacial. But there are some firms that are moving so fast on this, they're completely remote, Jeff, aren't they?
Rob, in the U.S., there are hundreds, at least probably thousands of remote-only accounting and bookkeeping firms, CAS practices. Even traditional CPA firms in the middle market are ditching the offices, or they're more conservative and they're keeping their offices, which I am in favor of, but building remote teams. So we call that hybrid. They are hybrid teams with a mix of office, a mix of remote, a mix of offshore, all under one cultural umbrella, one training system, all delivering value, I think, at a better bottom line to clients.
So most accounting firms are growing. They've got aspirations. They've got targets to hit. Maybe looking at private equity, VC money, M&A activity. They want to be competitive and relevant. So they know they need to not just replace staff that might be leaving, natural churn or moving on to some things, but keeping the staff that they've got. So the premise we've got here is that we're competing for talent in accounting. We need to build teams that stay. We need to keep that retention up. And if we're going to bring them in, recruit them, attract them, that's one thing. If we're going to keep them, that's another thing. What's the first step in keeping your talent?
The first step is we want to onboard them so successfully that it sets in motion a successful and thriving relationship with a new employee. And we want to build a system so that we can delegate that to our teams, and so that it's predictable and repeatable and reliable. We have a turnover problem in accounting. And by turnover, I mean the number of people that voluntarily leave every year. You're looking at between 20 and 25% over here in the United States, Rob. It is a major problem. When the AICPA surveys its firms, it is always in the top 3. How do I keep people? And we're struggling with it. And I, time after time, encounter firms that get the first step wrong, which is, I just convinced somebody to join my firm. Hooray. Now what do I do? I want you to have a thriving onboarding practice that hits the ground running for a new hire.
Yeah. Now, back in the day when we were all in office, in person, you could really treat somebody well with a wonderful onboarding package. You'd get the tour of the facilities, you'd get introductions to everyone, you'd get the nice lunch, you'd get shaking hands with all the important people, you'd get the VIP experience. That would onboard you, that would ingratiate you into the firm. When we're talking remote, that's not possible, is it, Jeff? So what are some of the obstacles we need to circumnavigate here?
Rob, I'm going to challenge you a little bit. I'm not so sure the beautiful display you just said actually happens.
Traditional onboarding, no, it's not working.
I've got to tell you a story. So I took a sales executive job 12 years ago. I left a company I've been at a long time, and I got poached. A headhunter called me, and I took a big pay raise, and I went to a new company. And I was pretty excited about it. I more took it for the money, which looking back, maybe had been a mistake. On my first day of my new job, I had left my home of 7 years. I had to fly to the corporate location of my new employer. I had a 5 a.m. flight. I left my wife and my little kids and went to this other city. I will not say the city because it'll give away who it was. Showed up at the office. knocked on the door. The receptionist let me in, and I said, "Here I am." She's like, "Who are you?" I said, "I'm the new hire. I'm the new sales guy in the advertising department." And she said, "Could I get back to you just 1 second?" Turns out they had no idea I was coming. I sat on the couch in reception for about 3.5 hours before somebody came along and sort of winged it for me. And my manager flew in on an emergency the next day, apologizing he had forgotten that I was starting. Needless to say, I left that job 6 months later. I was surprised I stayed 6 months. And that was a decade ago, and I'm still a little bit irritated about how that day started. So I give that analogy as a cautionary tale. We've got to start really, really good. Really, really good with new hires.
Yeah. We know the power of first impressions. By the time you get to an onboarding, you've signed the contract, you've virtually shaken hands, you've said yes, you've given up your previous role. It's all on the line there. So regardless of whether you're doing it in person or remote, what problem does a good onboarding solve? Why do we need to get this right?
A good onboarding problem solves every time we make a decision as human beings and we sign that contract. We immediately have some buyer's remorse, don't we? I just committed something. Am I sure I made the right decision? The clock is ticking. And so a good onboarding process addresses that buyer's remorse. A good onboarding process then solves what I consider the biggest problem we're facing right now in our profession, which is that clock is ticking for that hire to find weaknesses in his new home, her new employer, and look elsewhere. I found an interesting study that asked why knowledge workers leave their employer within the first 100 days. And it boiled down to 3 things. And this is what really good onboarding solves. And it's kind of sad, but knowledge workers leave their new employee within the first 100 days for one of 3 reasons. 1, they are not clear what their job is. 2, they never get what they need to do their job successfully. And 3, they are lonely. They are not engaged with their team. And that study is fascinating to me because whether we are talking about hiring somebody in a traditional office format or even riskier, hiring somebody in a remote setting, a good onboarding system and a good culture has to address those 3 topics frequently to reduce turnover, to increase engagement, and increase production. So we have a checklist for really good onboarding for accounting firms because we want to solve that problem from the get-go.
And we do hear stories about people changing their mind, this buyer's remorse. We've said there's a lot on the line. I guess you've got to plug people very quickly into a culture. If they're not coming into the office, if they're not seeing the color of the wallpaper and in the cafeteria or the water cooler, there's a lot that they are missing out on. We can't get away from that, can we?
You've got to plug them into the culture before they start. So one of our best practices, and if anyone wants to email me or get in touch with me, Rob, I can send them our accounting firm onboarding checklist as part of for the viewers. But one of the things on our checklist that is for there to be a team, the onboarding team of staff, and their job during the onboarding process is to follow a checklist of reaching out to the new hire. Phone calls, Zoom calls, LinkedIn, email, and beginning to build that relationship so the first time your new hire shows up on a Zoom call, there's a warmth there already. They're a part of a team. They're connected to people. They don't feel so lonely. We've got to get them plugged in before they even start their first day.
You're a big fan as well. I heard you talk about this idea of starting on a Friday and not on a Monday. Just unpack that for us.
Well, I don't know about you, but Mondays are pretty stressful for me.
It's just you, Jeff. All the world loves a Monday.
Oh, it's just me? Yeah, it's just me. Okay, cool. So then disregard this next tip. But if for the 2 or 3 of you listening who find Mondays to be stressful, why on earth will we want to put a new hire into that environment on their first day? You know what the typical setup is for onboarding? You show up on a Monday And what do? You do about 3 hours of paperwork. Let's do the paperwork before you start. If you if you're on like Gusto, everything is digital. That's a HR system and payroll system, and you can send the new hire links well before they start. Bring them in on a Friday, which is a little bit looser. It's more fun. And Rob, and I want to address this. A lot of hires are now remote. I still want and still suggest that a remote hire comes to the office if there is one for the onboarding. And if there's not, and if that's not feasible, that's fine, but there needs to be a system to address that. But let's start people on Fridays only.
And that's worth flying somebody in and putting them up in a hotel for a few days to, what's the word, to imbue that culture into them, to really submerge them in what you're offering and get them bought into the story.
Yeah, I highly encourage for remote hires, even freelance hires or full-time hires, to be flown in for the first few days of their experience. Probably a week. The next one is because what this tees up is very important. Instead of doing paperwork for the first 3 or 4 hours of your new job, I want a leadership meeting with the new hire. So their hiring manager or someone senior in this business, the owner, a partner, to sit down with a hire and have a leadership and vision discussion. Right? As leaders, we are vision cheerleaders, and we've got to reinforce the vision of where we're going over and over again. And so this is a long morning meeting, and it's how you want to kick this relationship off by starting from scratch and talking about the vision of our organization and where we want to go and how this job fits into that. Like, not just what I need you to do, but what are the results our company needs to have and needs to see and needs to experience because you're here. And tie their future days and future activities to the key results that are driving that vision. And so that's going to create really interesting questions from the new hire. It's going to manage expectations. It's going to show that they're important because they are here. What a great opportunity to set up a new relationship with a strategic conversation than by sending them to the HR department to fill out their, the I-9 form here in the U.S. or get their paperwork submitted. Like, let's start on the right.
I love that idea of a vision day, some forward thinking, because you want to, like I said, plug into a story. You want to be part of the narrative, don't you? You just don't want to be locked in a dark room, chained to a desk, crunching numbers in a spreadsheet. You want to be immediately jumped into some interesting work and a story you can get a hold of and go back to your wife, husband, partner, parents, and tell them what a great company you're with.
And I think this all starts with a mindset. So I'm hoping leaders who listen to this and watch us understand that I think it's easier to find a client than it is to hire somebody in 2024. But you think about the carefulness and the delicacy you approach and onboard a new client with. So our mindset shift here as leaders is this asset who has traded their career, which you only get one of, to work with our firm. The mindset is we're going to treat this opportunity even more carefully than we would a new client and make this a win because, gosh, we are in a people business. We are selling the time and expertise of people, and they are the assets of the organization. They're a physical asset of the organization. We've got to, so the mindset is everything we can do so this person is here 3 years from now and performing and excelling and loving it is all how you start.
Now, there's stuff you want to do. There's stuff you have to do with a fresh onboard. I'm thinking, Jeff, of the myriad of policies, procedures, systems, SOPs. This is the way we do things. This is the technologies. There's this whole training block, isn't there, that's required, not technical qualifications as such. We're not talking about CPE, CPD here, but we're talking about ingratiating yourself into the working practices of the firm. How do you go about that with a good onboard?
My preference is, one, there needs to be a system. This is a system that needs to take time to build. This is when we work on the business, not winging it. Remember my experience at my previous employer. And so the onboarding is really a 90 to 100 day process, but the training week starts with vision It starts with socialization. We're taking people out to lunch. We're taking people out for drinks after work. And then we shift into training, right? And so we've got to learn the systems, the software, probably. Sometimes people know the software we're coming in, but we need to learn the how we do things. So assign responsibility to that training. No one gets it all in the first few days, Rob. Training is a sort of, first block. We go through it, and then we schedule check-ins for repeated learning, troubleshooting, reiteration, redundancy, and get people. The more you invest now in the training, the fewer questions you'll have in the long run.
I'm just thinking one of the things I do as a professional interviewer, I work with a few accounting firms to tell us success stories. So I interview their people about why they're a great place to work and talk about the culture of the firm. I interview the leaders and the managers and say, tell me about your team. How do you run your team? How does it work? How do you bring people through? How do you develop them? So we get all of these stories on video, and it goes on their social, it goes on their website, but also it goes on their intranet as part of their onboarding. So that in that training or remote onboarding, before you even get them in, you're introducing them to the people and you're seeing the managers and leaders and you're finding out about their leadership style and you're getting to know the team so that when you do show up in person, you already feel like you're not best friends, but you're certainly acquainted. That's a part of the mix, isn't it?
Absolutely. I love something that landed for me when you said that was, even for small firms, you can have a learning program, a learning center.
Yeah, a university or whatever you want to call it.
Every time the company does a webinar, a town hall, record them, put them in a inexpensive online platform so people can review videos, little training videos. How easy is it to shoot a Loom video or record yourself on Zoom and drill down into, hey, as a refresher, this is how we address things in our tax software.
Jeff, one of the problems that occurs in onboarding, I've heard stories just like you have, is I don't know where to go to for this. I don't know who to ask about this. If I want X, what's Y? And that idea of a go-to person, or I don't even know where to go to start. Do you believe in buddies or points of contact or champions or mentors, coaches? How do we deal with that?
Yeah, buddy system. There is again, this has got to be a system. It's got to be written down, but there's a team of people who are going to be guides. They are the guides for the new hire. And there is one person, they are assigned to the new hire, and they are with them for that first year. And some of the activities are, they are a problem solver. They are a confidant. They can help address issues. There are so many little questions that we don't think about for the experience of a new hire. If you're in an office, it's like, well, where's the coffee maker? But for virtually, it's like, well, how do I get this software set up?
Where's the paper for the photocopier? The ink's ran out. What do I go to for that?
And so, but this buddy is also an informal way to flesh out issues that happen early. And Rob, at Accounting Fly, we've probably hired 1,000 CPAs over the past 10 years into accounting firms. And turbulence starts in almost every hire within the first 90 days. So that buddy is there to identify the turbulence and, if necessary, bring it to the hiring manager, to the department lead, and say, we've got a little problem with the new hire. Need you to step in here and address this. And so now we have a system to address needs, which is so important because that's another iron in the fire we can place to reduce that turnover and lift up engagement.
Another important role, it could be a buddy, but it's that person who knows everybody. So if I know that you do CrossFit on the weekend, or you play with your model trains, or you like flying kites, or you've got 4 kids or whatever it is, I'll know somebody else in the workforce that speaks your language and has your problems, and he's in your world and understands your vocabulary and where you're at in life. So if your signposter, if you like, can say, oh, by the way, Jeff, have you met Julie? You guys both do this. That's a social side of the onboarding, isn't it? That's generally not in an SOP.
Remember that study I told you about? People leave for 3 reasons. I don't know what my job is. I don't have what I need to do my job, or I'm lonely and disconnected. So what you're talking about is a built-in way to address I'm lonely and disconnected. Your guide is connecting the new hire to Julie, who likes to fly kites or has a pet boa constrictor or has lots of kids and is dealing with work-life balance issues. Accountants are trend to be a little introverted, right? So we need to have a system and a philosophy about making sure people get that social interaction that they need, especially if your hire is remote.
What about check-ins, Jeff, just to finish this off? Do I check in with you at the end of the day and you ask me how my day's gone? Is that at the end of the week? Are you clear about your role? Is that at the end of the month? What's the cadence for that?
Right. My recommendation is at a minimum, the hiring manager, whoever is the manager leader for this hire, has in the first year 30-day check-ins. All right. And we are really asking two direct questions. Are you clear on what your job is? Do you have what you need to do your job? 80% of the time, you're going to get, yes, I'm good. Yes, I'm good. 20% of the time, you're going to get an answer, especially as they get more comfortable with you. Say, no, I'm not clear. This is confusing to me. I need clarity. Next time I want to talk about how we survey entire teams and address some of these issues so that we can continually flesh out issues among hires. But specifically for onboarding, this is a Zoom or an in-person meeting, getting in touch, asking them how it's going. I would not be afraid to say, look, on a scale of 1 to 5, how is this going for you? Are you loving this? Like, give us feedback. And let's set that tone with the employee early. This is a company that values its employees, it values its feedback. I want to know how you're doing. I want to know how your work-life balance is doing. And so making sure we are clear is the cornerstone here. And we're addressing those 3 needs that I talked about from the beginning of the show.
And there must be 100 ways to do a piece of work. I think back to my time as a high school math teacher, and there's a few ways to do multiplication, a few ways to do division, a few ways to find out the area of a shape. So you give somebody a job, there needs to be a review process there on the work itself, the output, the quality, the speed of that. So it's not just asking how you're doing. I might be doing what I think is right and good work, but it might not be fitting with the standards of the firm. So how do we build that in?
Right. So let's go back to the first meeting, the vision meeting. I mentioned about how we need to talk about the vision of the company, where we're going, and how this job fits into that. And what I failed to mention is our way of doing things around here. And I set the expectation in that meeting, in our first year, we're going to give you a lot of feedback. Now, why we do that is because we're all a better company if we're doing things the way that we've identified as the standard. Now, if you have feedback on that, we would love to know. We're always looking to level up our processes. But in every work review, your manager or your teammates are empowered to give you feedback. Don't take it personally. It's part of our culture, and it's because we want you to be outstanding here, and we want to deliver great value. And so now we just gave ourselves permission to give constant feedback on how we're doing work. If you I'm a geek about communication. So I would love for in that vision meeting to talk about how we communicate. This is when it's appropriate to call a client. This is when it's appropriate to have a Zoom meeting with a client or internally. We email when we have, this is our funnel for when we email. This is our funnel for when we text. If there's an emergency, this is a funnel when we use Teams or Slack. And we're going to give you feedback to make sure we're all working on the same page here. So that is an essential, but I think it all starts with getting permission and setting the expectation that this is how we want to win with you.
You've just made me think of another potential problem there. I'm bringing you on, but I've got a 2 weeks personal time off, a holiday, a vacation booked, and we just can't avoid that. It's the way the hire is played out. So, or I might go off for a day and you need some instant answers and a ball gets dropped. So there needs to be a number 2 or a relay team, something like that, that you can fall back on as a new hire. So there's always somewhere you can go, right?
I think that's something that companies don't take enough time to think about is, okay, one, we want to have a flexible culture. We want, if you take vacation, we celebrate vacations. If you need to go home to deal with if you need to be offline to go deal with a repairman or a sick kid or a sick dog. So here's how we notify our team members. Here's our process for that. Here's where you go when someone that in the tax team, here's where you go if someone you're asking that question to is not there. Here's the backup, and here's the backup to them. This is written down stuff. It's going to be in their manual or their brief that they get when they start. And if you take that seriously, it's going to prevent a lot of headaches for sure. That's a great call.
Yeah. And same for the new hires. This is where you go. If I'm not around, you can't reach me. I love that. Let's sum this up. Jeff, we've called this episode Onboarding New Hires in the Optimum Way in a Remote World. So we're assuming it could be an in-person hire. They're working and living in the vicinity. But if we're talking about the right talent stack, which we've hit in other episodes, this is probably a remote hire. So just summarize for us the problem of why we need to get onboarding right, the solution, some of the things we talked about here as a summary, and a first step, maybe for a firm evaluating what their onboarding looks like if they're moving to remote.
Sure. Yeah. So the problem that we're trying to solve here is that turnover is high. And I believe it's easier to get a client in an accounting firm right now than it is to make a hire. Well, think of all the care and the caution and the delicacy about onboarding a new client. And let's apply the importance of that to new hires, because the pain point is we do not need the turnover. The turnover causes cascading issues inside the firm. A strong start reduces turnover. A strong start accomplishes three things: clarity on the job and the vision, making sure they have what they need to do their job, and connecting socially to the culture of the team. And so a good onboarding will do that. It makes it fun for the new staff. It makes it clear, and it makes it smooth, and it reduces turnover. And the next step is to lay out, a checklist of onboarding and turn this into a repeatable system and assign ownership of the different pieces. I would start very simply with the buddy system and the onboarding team to reach out to the new hire in the 3 weeks before they start the firm. Help them get over their buyer's remorse. They will have anxiety about selecting you as an employer. They are thinking about the opportunities they passed up on. Kill that by making them excited to join your business.
It's such a simple concept of making people feel welcome and bringing them into the fold such that they feel part of the team immediately. It's crazy how...
Why do we always get it wrong?
What could go wrong? Yeah, but
Why? But no, we human beings get this wrong because we're so stressed out. But if you focus on this, you take the time to get out of the busy work and responding to emails and build this. Get my checklist. This takes 30 minutes to build, but the cost of turnover is 3 times the salary for every person you leave. The economic cost is.
We'll put a link to your onboarding checklist in the show notes, Jeff, so people can check that out. But as my co-host on the Accounting Talent podcast, thank you again for your insights today. It's been a great show.
Thanks, Rob.